In this video, we'll discuss the psychodynamic theories of personality, both Freudian and Neo-Freudian theories. So we'll briefly discuss Freud as part of the historical context on personality theories. So you may have noticed when we discussed lifespan development, we didn't discuss Freud's psychosexual stages. And that's because, well, there are some therapists that do still adhere partially to the psychodynamic perspective in therapy. There are many other more current theories that are just better in practice. Most of Freud's theories have been debunked with research, and much of his work was just based on observations from his patients. There wasn't really any empirical research done to develop his theories. One thing that is still commonly practiced in therapy that was developed by Freud is the idea of free association. So Freud is considered the father of psychoanalysis. It's often what you think of when you think of therapy because it's portrayed in the movies a lot, but that really isn't how therapy is done now. He was an Australian physiologist, so he was a doctor, and he had people come into his office and they had these ailments, and he decided they weren't caused by physical issues, that they were caused by psychological issues. So Freud believed that what a majority of what we experience in our lives, the underlying emotions, beliefs, feelings, and impulses, are not really available to us at a conscious level. He explains behavior and personality in terms of the unconscious dynamics within the individual. He emphasized internal conflicts, attachments, motivations. He believed that most of what drives us is buried below the unconscious, that we have, again, these internal conflicts that need resolved. He also believed that our adult personalities were formed by our experiences in early childhood, that really the first 5 years was important, again, focusing on conflicts that we didn't resolve during those times, especially if we didn't have a healthy personality. As mentioned, Freud really believed that most of what drives us is beneath the surface, unconscious. And this was his structure of personality. And this is an iceberg metaphor, because what do we see of an iceberg? Just the tip of it, right? So what do we see of our personalities is, at the conscious level is really just a small portion of it. So in going with this analogy, Freud really thought that, again, what drove us, what defined our personalities was at the unconscious level, and that very little we were aware of what actually, influences our personality. So he divides the structure of the personality into three components. The first is the id. Again, the id being the unconscious, everything that we're unaware of, and that being the main driving force. Then we have the ego. So first we have the id, and that's all what's unconscious. It's all of these, violent motives, fears, unacceptable sexual desires, irrational wishes, selfish needs, immoral urges. So it's all these things that we have buried that we don't want to consciously acknowledge, and that's the main driving force of our personality. It's the needs and the wants. Then we have our ego, and the ego goes between all three levels, and because as you'll see, it needs to, because it's going to mediate between the id and what he called the superego. So superego also can be across all three levels, and the superego is our moral conscience. So we're going to go in and discuss each of these in a little bit more detail. So first, the id. The id operates according to the pleasure principle. So it's present from birth. You think about how a baby operates, right? An infant, right? It just knows what it wants and needs. It cries. It cries to get fed. It cries when it has a dirty diaper. It cries when it's too bright out. It cries when it's tired. And so all that baby needs, what's present from birth, is those basic needs and wants. And again, this is all unconscious in our adult personalities. And if you think about this infant, they know when they're hungry, they know when they're tired, they know when they're have a dirty diaper, and they're not considerate or caring of their parents' feelings and wishes, right? They just want something when they want it. So if they're hungry at 4 o'clock in the morning, they're going to cry and want fed at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, if it is too strong in an individual, then that individual will be kind of a self-gratifying, uncaring to others, maybe narcissistic and impulsive. So the ego is the second system to emerge, and it arises in the first 3 years of life, and it operates according to what's known as the reality principle. So again, if you think about a young child, somewhere around the age of 3 or 4, they start to realize that maybe they can't always have what they want immediately. Some children, that takes a little bit longer, but this is according to Freud's theory. And the role of the ego is to mediate between those needs and wants of the id and the demands of society and the superego. So you can think of it as being the rational part of the mind. And because of that, it has to float between all three levels. And we can see here, I've changed this iceberg metaphor, and it's just showing you that the ego can go between all three. The id is the unconscious. And if you think about it, this is the rational part of the mind is telling that id, you can't always have what you want. You need to wait sometimes. And so it does, as we said, it floats between all three levels. And if the ego is too strong, the person might be, very rational and efficient, but kind of cold and boring and distant. So at the end of the phallic stage of development, or around the age of 5, the superego develops, and it's our moral conscious. So you can kind of think of the id as being that little devil on the shoulder of a cartoon character, and then the superego being that angel, and then the ego being your head, kind of trying to decide between the two of them. So we said it develops around the age of 5. This is, again, the phallic stage, or the end of the phallic stage. We didn't discuss Freud's psychosexual stages, but this is one of his stages. And at this stage, he thinks that our development is complete as well. So this superego or moral conscious, it stores and enforces the rules. It's that inner voice that's telling you not to do something or telling you what you did was wrong. So it stores those rules, enforces them, and it judges the id. It operates according to 2 subsystems. The ego ideal, which is knowing what your parents approve of or value, and the conscious, knowing what they would disapprove of, making you feel guilty when you do something bad or break the rules. So if the superego is too strong, a person might feel guilty all the time, may even have some sort of insufferably saintly personality. If the superego is too strong, a person might feel guilty all the time. They might have this kind of insufferably saintly personality. So when the ego can't balance out the id's wants and needs and the superego's moral conscious, he went on to talk about all of these defense mechanisms that we've developed to deal with those. Things like repression, projection, denial. We're not going to have the time to go in and talk about all of that because we're talking about Freud's theory in terms of historical context, really. But some of those terms we still kind of use freely. Some of them have some research evidence behind them, but most of them that do not. Here's a little meme to leave Freud with. Now we're going to talk about a Neo-Freudian theory. And basically this is just based off of kind of Freud's teachings, but they've added some newer, more modern touches to it. So Erikson was a Neo-Freudian where he didn't stop at age 5. He had stages going all the way into adulthood for lifespan development. The one we're going to talk about here in terms of personality is Carl Jung, or the Jungian theory, also known as analytical psychology. So Carl Jung was originally a friend and colleague of Freud. So they went around Europe teaching together about the psychodynamic perspective, but tensions developed over Jung's belief about the unconscious. So they both believed in the personal unconscious, this idea that we have a reservoir of personal information and memories that was once conscious but has been forgotten or suppressed and is unique to the individual. So this is what Freud felt our personalities were based off of. Where they disagreed and why Carl Jung broke off from Freud is he believed that we also had this collective unconscious, that this was at the deepest level of the human psyche, and it contained universal memories, symbols, experiences of all humans, and that this was also an important part of our personality. So again, a reservoir of inherited experiences, and he believed in what are called archetypes, and he thought that these were really the DNA of the human psyche. So he felt that these archetypes were kind of innate psychological dispositions. So just like we're all programmed to have 2 legs, 2 eyes, a heart, so we are also programmed to have these archetypes, which are kind of generic, idealized models of a person, a personality, or a behavior. So he thought these archetypes were innate, universal prototypes, but they're difficult to study through research. But you can look at them going back to myths and stories and arts and dreams that have been recorded throughout time, and you do see some of these universal archetypes in those sources. Now, while I have an optional reading for you on Canvas, I'm just going to briefly discuss archetypes, but if you want to learn more, you can read about it on Canvas. So again, the archetype is kind of this generic idealized model of a person, personality, or behavior. Think of it being kind of the stereotype or the epitome. When we talked about concepts, it would be like the prototype. So there's 4 main archetypes. The self, which is identified as, which is the unified conscious and unconscious. The shadow is the opposite of the ego and contains qualities that the ego possesses but does not necessarily identify with, or the evil side of human nature. The anima and the animus. The anima is the feminine image in a man's psyche, and the animus is the masculine image in a female psyche. And then there's other common archetypes that we see in literature are the child, the hero, the great mother. I think the great mother might be like the Virgin Mary or the Greek goddess Aphrodite. The hero you see in comic books, Superman, Spider-Man, or even Neo from The Matrix. And the child takes the form of like a child, but often adult-like qualities, like Linus from the Peanuts cartoons or Pippin from Lord of the Rings. Both have kind of childlike qualities, but are wise beyond their years. So one of the most important things that Carl Jung really brought to modern personality theories was his proposal that we approach life in one of two ways. This idea of extroversion versus introversion, where an extrovert is energized when they're with others. They seek attention. They speak quickly and loudly. They think out loud. They prefer verbal communication. They can be easily distracted. And sometimes they act without thinking. And so again, that's one end of the spectrum though, right? And then an introversion is they're more energized when they're alone. They're better off being by themselves. They avoid attention. They don't like it. They often speak slowly, softly. They think before they speak. They prefer... It says verbal communication here, but I'm going to say they prefer written communication. That is a typo on the slide. They pay attention easily, and they're very cautious. They're cautious about what they do. They're, again, more reserved, more keep to themselves. And so, again, you'll see that this is one of the cornerstones of modern personality theories. It's one of the big 5 personality traits.